home. Well, I gotta say I wasn't too convinced when I came there because I want to say home of the pizza, but I wasn't too convinced for the deep dish. I wasn't too impressed. I mean, they told me next time I come back get the flatbread. So we're reaching all the way to Chicago with attorney at law Jonathan Steele tonight. Welcome, Jonathan. Before we start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm a divorce and family law attorney in the city of Chicago. Been doing it for about 12 years, and I like it. So that's me.
Okay. So what drew you to go into, family law?
I started clerking for a lawyer when I was 16, and I clerked in the summers. As during high school, I clerked through the summers in college, and then I just sort of latched onto him, and he was a divorce lawyer, so I just sort of fell into it.
Okay. So you said 12 years you've been in the practice with this. So I asked you one question because I know a young lady, her mom was a divorce lawyer. She said at the height of COVID, numbers went up for divorces.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was it was somewhat socioeconomic dependent. I think the lower income divorce rates went up for sure because people were living in smaller apartments on top of each other, and they were home all the time. Some of the higher net worth people, they had bigger homes, they had second homes, and so they weren't necessarily on top of each other. So that was pretty steady for those cases.
Okay, so we'll get into, I guess, the proceedings because people think just when they see divorce, they see child custody, they see determining child support. They really don't know the actual legal terms or litigations that go with it. So could you walk us through a typical step involving a divorce proceedings and what clients should expect during the process?
Yeah, I mean, some of that depends on if you have kids or if you are without kids. If you have kids, there are two basic components to a divorce case. There's the child-related issues. In Illinois, we've rebranded custody as just allocation of parental responsibilities. Same thing, new name. And so in the child realm, you're deciding who gets to make decision making for the child in major buckets like education, religion, healthcare, extracurricular. And then you're deciding what parenting schedule is best for the child and what child support should be ordered. And then there's the financial side of it where you are identifying all of the assets of an estate, you're valuing them, and then you're distributing them in an equitable way.
Okay. So how do you come up with who gets the child? Like, who gets custody?
It's a case by case basis. It's dependent on the judge and what he or she thinks is in the best interest of the child. A lot of emphasis is put on who has been making decisions for the child historically, who has been sort of the primary caretaker of the child historically. And then another big factor is, who has a greater willingness and ability to facilitate a relationship between the other parent and the child. So those are some main considerations that go into that.
Oh, don't start this tonight. I'm coming back. Let me go find this. Where I sent the last email at. All right, this is what it does sometimes. All right, let me go through the thing. This is what it does sometimes. It actually kicks me out. But I heard everything you said. I was just had to listen through something else. So now I'm on my phone trying
No
to
worries.
conduct this. Now I just got to turn this volume down and see if I can't get back correctly. I want volume. I don't want that. All right. So where were we at with this? Okay. So you talked about, the arrangement. So the child custody arrangement, you said there was different types on how the court decides who has the best interest for the child, correct?
Yeah, one of the main considerations is really who which of the parents has a greater willingness to facilitate a relationship with the other parent. So if you are trash talking the other parent and you are, trying to alienate the child from the other parent, that's going to cut against you pretty heavily.
Okay. So how do you get those? I'm guessing I would say, how do you get those type of um, evidence about, down talking the other parent, such as things like that?
That one's hard to put teeth to. It's hard to prove. It depends, how old the child is. The older they get, the more able they are to report that themselves. Some of it is just sort of observing the manifestations of alienation. So if a child is all of a sudden reluctant to go see the other parent, or they start vocalizing things that are not age appropriate for a child to be saying, like, mom is negligent. Well, that usually doesn't come out of a 5-year-old's mouth. So if you start hearing that, well, where'd that come from? Right.
Well, because you get children do repeat things. So a word that is that big, it has to come from an adult or somebody that's older, that maybe an older brother, older sister, cousin, brother, something like that. That has to happen. So once you arrange all these, the child custody arranges, now how do you determine the calculation of of the child support or alimony that's being about to be recouped?
Yeah, in Illinois, it used to be simple. It used to be if you had one child, you'd pay 20% of your net income. Two children were 28%. Three was 32. We moved away from that. We're in something called an income shares model now, where it's basically you plug in both parents' income into a formula or a calculator, and it just spits out a child support number. And most of the time, that's how you calculate child support. Alimony, or what is called maintenance in Illinois, is also a formula. You're looking at a third of somebody's income less a quarter of the payee's income, and that gives you basically the amount. And then duration of the order is also a formula, and it's contingent upon how long you've been married.
All right, so you said that you put into a screen and it spits out a calculation. So does it take into effect of your expenses that you have to pay?
Not really. There are certain expenses that go into the equation, like health insurance premiums. But other than that, no. And if there are child-related expenses, extracurricular activities in school and books and clothes, those are add-ons. Child support is sort of like the floor. It's the minimum. And so you're calculating child support based on your gross income from all sources. And so the expenses aren't really taken into account.
Okay, so now there's always rumors that come across, with inside the community that says if you're married and you're going through non-spousal support through another child, that your wife or husband has to deem possibly 10% of their income as well.
That your current spouse? No, yeah. So that may be the case in other states. In Illinois, it's a consideration what the new spouse makes, but only insofar as it affects your expenses. So if you're making $30,000 a year, but your spouse makes $400,000 a year, and they're paying all your expenses, the fact that they're paying all your expenses and lessening your load is going to factor into the equation. It's not the new spouse's obligation by any means to support your child, but the fact that they are lessening your expenses is a consideration.
Okay, so in Illinois it's not. But now say you go back, I'm guessing since you already got the court order, support order, I should say, is there chances when you go modify that it may increase or it may lower?
Just in general?
Just in general, yes. The chances that it can increase or lower, and what would be the modifications that make it go up and make it go lower?
So child support is always modifiable. It's no matter what throughout the duration that you owe child support, it's modifiable. It can go up, it can go down, and normally when it goes up or down, it's because of a substantial change in circumstances. So child support will go up if there's no real set number to it, but if your income or the income of the payor goes up 20% or so, you can expect to see an increase. If you lose your job, you can expect to see a decrease, provided you go in and you ask for that. Or if you just suffer a pay decrease, don't necessarily lose your job, you can still expect to see a decrease. So you really just have to see a swing in one direction or the other, and it has to be substantial.
So, okay, so now you decide you just don't want to pay. And I know in others in my state, but in the state of Illinois, how far does the law enforcement get into it? If you just decide I'm not paying and you get into the rears, is there a process where as though you may have suspended license, may see jail time, anything of that nature, may not be able to get your passport? Any of those things are possible?
All of them. If you don't pay child support, the person that you owe the child support to can file a petition for contempt. They ask the court to hold you in contempt for violating a court order. If the court holds you in contempt, it has a number of tools in its toolkit to coerce compliance with the order. It can put you in jail up to 180 days until you make payment, which, if you're imagining, is pretty difficult to make a payment while you're sitting in a jail cell. It can suspend your driver's license. It can revoke your passport. It can, if you're not working, it can order you to submit job applications, maintain a job diary. It can suspend business licenses. It can garnish wages. It can garnish bank accounts. There's a big tool chest that the judge has access to in order to get the child supported.
Okay. All right. So say me and my spouse or whoever, we start having some family law issues. And I see a million commercials come on TV all through the day, all through the night. How do I choose the correct one? Because there's a bunch of you guys that's promoted on TV, radio, ads on the sides of buses, trains, all that. How do you pick the correct one?
That's a good question. I would avoid the buses. I would avoid the side of the road ads. Those aren't always the good ones. Generally, you get what you pay for. Good lawyers aren't cheap, and cheap lawyers aren't good. So pay for the best one you can afford. And don't be immediately scared off by that initial sticker shock. If you're meeting with a lawyer and they say, I charge $400 or $500 an hour, and you're thinking, well, geez, I just met someone yesterday that was $200. That's only really half the equation. So if it takes the lawyer that charges $200 an hour 2 or 3 times as long to do the same work, you may be coming out behind. Or if you hire that less expensive lawyer for $200 an hour and they screw up your case, and then you need to go to a more experienced lawyer to unscrew up your case, you're coming out behind. So, you're better off doing it right the first time. You're better off hiring the best and sometimes more expensive lawyer that you can afford. And just looking for someone that has a track record, someone that's been in business for a while, somebody that's been doing family law for a while, somebody that's experienced, and maybe most importantly, just somebody that you're comfortable with, somebody that you can communicate with, somebody that's relatable to you, and somebody that seems like they are on the same page with you as far as your goals and how to achieve them.
So, okay, we started to show up. You said 12 years. How do you sell me Jonathan Steele? How do I get to you? I know you said you're not on the side of a bus. You're not on the side of the metro. You're not on the side of the road. How do you get my business? Because I'm not sure if it's like when we sit down, is it something that you say and I feel that's right, how I fit? Or is it something that you do that you say, this is how I'm going to get you out of this situation, or whatever you kind of agree?
Yeah, I mean, most of my business comes from old business. So happy clients are great referral sources. So just, doing a good job for people over the years, they refer their friends, their family, and their trust in me means the world. And it keeps me in business. So every time you go to court and you win something for somebody, you're building up a referral system. You're encouraging that person to send their friends to you. So the way I would have gotten your business would be to have done a good job for a friend of yours, to have done a good job for a family member of yours, or sometimes just people being in the court system or being in the courtroom on that first court date, and they happen to stumble across me, watch me make an argument on behalf of someone else and say, hey, I like the the way you present yourself, or, that was a good argument. And so they'll ask me right then and there, can I have your business card? And they'll call me from that. So there's a variety of different ways, but most of it's word of mouth. It's organic, so to speak.
Okay, so you got the customer. I mean, you're representing somebody. Have you ever had any, I guess I should say difficult, not high profile, but like high difficult conflict divorces?
Almost all of them are high conflict. We're expensive in the Chicago area as far as a law firm, as far as my hourly rates go. And so people don't come to me for run of the mill or easy cases. They're coming to me because their case is going to be a war, because they're on the eve of trial, because they don't trust their prior lawyer to try the case anymore. So the vast majority of my cases are high conflict. They're contentious, to say the least.
Okay, so has it ever been that somebody asked you something and say, I need this amount, I need this, I need X, Y, and Z, and never you thought in your mind and just said, man, that shit is outrageous. There's no way we're going to be able to get that.
It happens pretty often. People expect that, the sign on my door says magician sometimes and not lawyer. And I try to, manage clients' expectations. I think that's a huge part of my job, because if I'm over promising something to someone, I'm going to under deliver. And so I like to be realistic with them and tell them, this is what you can expect. The judge will order, push comes to shove. And so if it's in line with what the judge ends up ordering, then they say, this is what I was expecting. But if I'm over promising and saying, yeah, I'm just going to let you call the shots and run with the unreasonable expectation, I'm going to under deliver for you. So I don't think I've done my job very well if that's my approach.
Well, that's understandable that you don't, like you said, they're not a magician with, I mean, I kind of understand in any field that you in, especially dealing with someone getting something in return, they can ask for astronomical numbers that they know that they shouldn't be asking for,
Right.
So I understand that. So I guess the biggest thing, since we already walked into the divorce, what you're saying, high conflict divorces, about, could you explain that? Because we know what a prenuptial is. Can you explain what a postnuptial is?
It's basically the same thing, except it's after you've been married. So sometimes it occurs to someone too late that, gee, I should have had a prenup. Or, this isn't working out, or, I've come into money, or I've picked up a high paying job and I don't want this to be about money. And so people will come in and they'll ask for basically a prenup, but post marriage. So it's the same for all intents and purposes, except it's the when. It's after you're already married.
Okay, so my understanding is basically, I think what you're saying is anything that we kind of build together while we married, that's kind of is going to go to both. It's being split by both of us.
In the absence of a prenup or a postnup, at least in Illinois, property that's accumulated or acquired during the course of your marriage is marital property, and it gets divided. In Illinois, it's an equitable distribution, which is similar to a community property state like California, where it's 50-50 no matter what. But in Illinois, you start with that 50-50 and you can move off of that in one direction or the other based on a variety of different factors, like whether or not somebody has the ability to work and earn money in the future, whether one party contributed more to the acquisition or preservation of an asset. So we're a little bit different than a community property state.
Okay. So have you ever had somebody sit down and say, look, I don't care what she wants, just get me out of this. I just want to leave. Just get me out of this. She can have whatever she wants.
Yeah, and unfortunately, sometimes that includes somebody walking away from their child. I've had that happen where somebody says, I don't even care to see my child. I will waive all of my parental rights. I'll waive parenting time. I just don't want anything to do with this person anymore. Those situations are unfortunate. The ones that you're describing when it's not really child related are a little bit easier to stomach, and it happens. Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we could say, well, I'm pretty sure it does happen. Well, you just said it happens, so I guess it does happen. So when you have an impact of domestic violence on custody, like what protections are available for the victims within the family law system?
Well, if you're a victim of domestic violence, you can seek an order of protection, which is just a restraining order. You can go in on an emergency basis. You can get up to a 21-day order that requires the respondent of that case to not abuse you, to not harass you, to not contact you. And at the end of that 21-day period, the court should hold a hearing on a plenary order of protection and extend it for up to 2 years if it finds that abuse has occurred. And, to your question about how in a custody case, those apply whether you're in a custody case, whether you're in a divorce case, whether you have no kids at all. But it impacts the custody case if there's domestic violence, because a judge is going to take that into account when deciding which parent should have the majority of the parenting time, which parent should make decisions for the child. Because obviously, if you're abusing your spouse or you're the mother of your child or something like that, that's not a good reflection on you as to your parental judgment to be a parent.
Gotcha. Okay. Last question. For someone going through it through the first time, could you offer them any tips? We don't want you to go too deep into the tips because we know you cost. Could you just give them any general tips, to advocate for themselves effectively?
Yeah, I think, it's important to zoom out, look at your case, big picture, try to stay focused on the what really matters, the big picture goals. It's real easy to get drawn into all the little things, all the little skirmishes, fight about stuff that really doesn't matter, big picture. Try to avoid counting the minutes with your parenting time. It's quality over quantity. Worry more about what it is that you're doing with your child when you have them, and not how many hours do I have versus how many hours does my spouse or the other parent have. And I think it's important to figure out what communication method your attorney prefers and try to align the two. Because if you're just passing each other, if you're writing novels to your lawyer in emails and they're a telephone lawyer, you're going to rack your bill up like crazy. You're not going to be communicating effectively. And so you need to get on the same page with your lawyer and figure out what's the best way to communicate so that you are being effectively and cost consciously advocated for.
Okay. Well, thank you for all the tips and advice you gave us. Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Jonathan Steele, Illinois super lawyer, rising stars, emerging lawyer, top 10 lawyer under 40, top family law attorney under 40. You can check him out on steelefamlaw.com. Other than that, if they're in the Chicago, Illinois area, where can they actually come and see you face to face at?
I'm right across from the courthouse. I'm at 161 North Clark Street. It's the corner of Clark and Randolph.
Okay, Clark and Randolph. So thank you for coming. I know you just got out of court, so definitely thank you for showing up and doing this podcast with us tonight.
Not a problem. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you. You guys know, same week, same time, same place, same time next week. Hopefully we don't have any technical difficulties next week. Remember, steelefamlaw.com. This is attorney law, family law attorney Jonathan Steele, and myself. Thank you for listening to Amsterdam Talk. See you next week.